Welcome back to the Offseason Fantasy Pros. I'm Andrew Erickson. Today, we're breaking down the top 12 wide receivers for the 2025 NFL Fantasy Football season. I made the following list using FantasyPros ECR in conjunction with some early best ball ADP. But before we get into the list of top wide receivers to draft next year, you want a chance to win a signed Mike Evans Buccaneers helmet for free, courtesy of our friends at pristineauction.com. All you need to do is head to fantasypros.com/contest. Complete the form and either download the Fantasy Pros My Playbook app, leave a review on the podcast, follow us on X, Instagram, or TikTok at Fantasy Pros. The more actions you complete, the more entries you receive. We're announcing a winner right here on the channel. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe, turn on those notifications so you can be alerted new episodes are up and to claim your prize. Now, let's get to the wide receiver list for 2025. Tee Higgins. Higgins is expected to lead the Bengals in free agency after a dominant 2024 season. When healthy, the Bengals wide receiver finished third in points per game behind only Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. But I'm sure a lot is going to be made of Higgins moving up from a real-life wide receiver 2 to a wide receiver 1 on a new team. We have a 5-game sample size of Higgins as the Bengals wide receiver 1 without Jamar Chase. Nearly 9 targets, 102 receiving yards, and nearly 17 points per game in half PPR. Alpha wide receiver 1 numbers, but slightly above expectation. Unless Higgins lands in the perfect spot in free agency, he might be overvalued. Losing Joe Burrow will be a downgrade, and that can make it tougher for him to perform against lofty expectations compared to his body of work as a fantasy wide receiver 2. McConkey. The Chargers rookie wide receiver led his draft class in yards per route run, finished 13th in total points among wide receivers. But during the second half of the season, the Bolts wide receiver absolutely surged. He was a wide receiver 10 from weeks 8 through 17. Going through the postseason, he posted a 25% target share, averaged nearly 99 receiving yards per game, second only to Jamar Chase, averaging 16.4 points per game. With Justin Herbert and the same offensive coaching staff at the helm in 2025, we should expect nothing less than 100 catches from healthy Ladd McConkey in 2025. Drake London. London was a red zone monster, ending the season with 23 red zone targets, tied for the third most among all wide receivers. He's also a target hog, with the third highest target rate per route run at 30%. He also led wide receivers in red zone target rate over the past 3 seasons. Chase the red zone targets for wide receivers. This has been one of the biggest predictors of high-end fantasy seasons at the position. Therefore, I'm going to be very high ranking and drafting London in 2025 after being lower on him first consensus last season. Honestly, number 10 might be too low for the wide receiver 5 in total points through 18 games last year. The Falcons' number 1 wide receiver was targeted on 41% of his routes run with Michael Penix to close out the year last season. A.J. Brown. Brown finished last season as a wide receiver 10 in points per game, and wide receiver 18 overall, having missed 3.5 games with injuries. AJB was the only wide receiver to command over 50% of his team's total air yards, ranking first in the NFL with a 51% air yard share. He also finished second with a 30% target share. His 46% top 12 weekly finisher rate was the second highest among all wide receivers, compared only to Mike Evans. He had 5 100-yard games, tied for the most among all wide receivers through 17 weeks. The 28-year-old is still an elite wide receiver, and he will benefit greatly if the Eagles' combination of their ground game and defense experience any type of regression in 2025. Malik Nabers. The LSU product had a historic rookie campaign, finishing as a wide receiver 7 overall and in points per game through 17 weeks. He broke Puka Nacua's rookie record for receptions for a wide receiver with 109 catches for over 1,200 yards and 7 touchdowns in just 15 games played. The usage in Brian Daboll's offense was unmatched, first in target share, targets per game, and expected fantasy points per game. How he was able to produce at such a high level with such bad quarterplay in New York is a credit to his skill. Even so, quarterback concerns reared their ugly head at times, and that's going to be a constant battle in 2025. Please, fantasy football gods, let us have Jameis Winston to the Giants. Brian Thomas Jr. The rookie from Jacksonville finished as a wide receiver 4 overall and wide receiver 9 in points per game in 2024. The last 7 games with Mac Jones basically as his quarterback, BTJ averaged over 18.5 PPR points per game, 19.5 expected fantasy points per game, a 31% target share, 48% air yard share, and 96 plus receiving yards per game. Thomas pushed his total of games with 75 or more receiving yards to 11, which was the most by any rookie in the Super Bowl era. With new head coach Liam Cohen and quarterback Trevor Lawrence leading the Jaguars offense next year, buckle up for BTJ wide receiver 1 season, part 2. Amon-Ra St. Brown. St. Brown finished another stellar season as a wide receiver 3 overall through 17 weeks, averaging 15.4 points as the wide receiver 3 throughout the postseason. The Sun God was number 1 overall in red zone receptions, but he did overperform his 14.6 expected points per game, which ranked 18th among wide receivers. Over the final 7 games of the regular season, St. Brown's target share fell from 27% to 23%, with both Sam Laporta and Jameson Williams more involved in the offense. That should be more of a concern next season, especially given J-Mo's massive breakout in 2024. So, can St. Brown continue to thrive as a top 5 fantasy wide receiver amid high target competition, especially after losing offensive coordinator Ben Johnson? What do you think? Nico Collins. Collins averaged 2.86 yards per route run in 2024, second among all wide receivers. He picked up right where he left off in 2023, finishing the season as a wide receiver 6 in points per game. He missed 4 games with an injury, was very effective on the field as CJ Stroud's clear number 1 target. Even when Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell were healthy, he was the alpha of the Texans' passing attack. With both of those guys potentially not playing for Houston in 2025, Collins will stay atop the 2025 wide receiver fantasy football rankings. CeeDee Lamb. Despite playing hurt and losing quarterback Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb gutted out 15 games en route to a wide receiver 8 finish, wide receiver 9 in points per game. He caught at least 4 passes in all but 1 game, marking his 3rd straight season with 100-plus receptions. Lamb played 7 games with Prescott to open the year, which he was generally effective, averaging 15.6 fantasy points per game, but without Prescott, Lamb crawled to a wide receiver 12 finish from weeks 9 through 16. Even so, CeeDee Lamb is still the number 1 guy in Dallas and flashed his elite ceiling before injuries derailed the Dallas offense. Puka Nacua. Puka got hurt in week 1, forcing him to miss the next 5 games, but once he returned, he was a force in fantasy. The Rams wide receiver 1 finished 4th in fantasy points per game. Weeks 8 through 18, he outscored all wide receivers not named Jamar Chase. He was 9th in red zone targets, led the NFL in target share at 31%. His full 36% target rate per route run ranked 1st in the NFL. The second-year wide receiver led the NFL in yards per route run at 3.23. Only 4 other players have accomplished this feat of more than 3 yards per route run since 2017: Tyreek Hill, Cooper Kupp, Julio Jones, and Nico Collins. With Cooper Kupp as good as gone next year, Nacua is in a position to see a monster touchdown boost, presuming Matthew Stafford is back at quarterback for the Rams. Justin Jefferson. The All-Pro wide receiver shut down any doubt that he could produce without Kirk Cousins in 2024, finishing as the fantasy wide receiver 2 overall and in points per game. He caught over 100 passes, surpassed 1,500 receiving yards, tying a career high with 10 touchdowns, finishing 1st in the NFL in end zone targets. He tied Jamar Chase for the most wide receiver 1 weekly finishes with 12. It was his 4th time finishing inside the top 5 fantasy wide receivers, but it should be noted that Jefferson's production did dip slightly after tight end TJ Hawkinson returned to the lineup. It's very possible that with the quarterback question marks for the Vikings in 2025, Jefferson's production, specifically with touchdowns, could decline. But it would need to be an absolute implosion for the Vikings wide receiver to fall outside the top 5, just based on his talent and deployment in the Kevin O'Connell offense. Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase exceeded all expectations, finishing as a wide receiver 1 overall while taking home the Triple Crown. 127 catches for over 1,700 yards and 17 tutties. 20 points per game in half PPR, 4 points more per game than the next closest wideout. He led the NFL in red zone targets, which has been the clear signal for wide receiver 1 overall seasons. The past 6 number 1 overall wide receivers have finished 1st in the NFL in red zone targets. The only major change for 2025 is that Tee Higgins will likely be gone, but the sample size of Chase without Higgins over the last 3 seasons is more elite wide receiver 1 production. All that matters is that he and Joe Burrow stay healthy, as Chase attempts to be the first back-to-back wide receiver 1 finisher since Antonio Brown. That's the list of top 12 wide receivers for the 2025 NFL fantasy football season. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe, share with all your friends, and let me know what you think of the list. And before you go, remember, if you want a chance to win a signed Mike Evans Buccaneers helmet for free, courtesy of our friends at pristineauction.com, all you need to do is head to fantasypros.com/contest, complete the form, either download the Fantasy Pros My Playbook app, leave a review for the podcast, follow us on X, Instagram, or TikTok at Fantasy Pros. The more actions you complete, the more entries you receive. I'm announcing a winner right here on the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe, turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up to claim your prize. Thanks for watching.